Hey guys, tonight we're waking up inside a medieval army camp at dawn on the cold, muddy edge of history. There's no soft bed, warm blanket, or alarm clock with a gentle melody. Just stiff joints, damp clothes, and the realization that the only thing separating you from the bare earth is your bad decision to sleep in armor. This is what morning looked like when you were a foot soldier in the Middle Ages. Uncomfortable, noisy, and too early. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. And leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always find it fascinating to know who's joining me on these sleepy little journeys worldwide. Now turn off the lights, turn on a gentle fan if you enjoy that soft background noise, and let's quietly slip into tonight's journey. You don't wake up because of soft morning sunlight, but because someone kicked your leg while fumbling into their armor. It's still barely light outside. The military camp is quiet for now, but you know it won't be long before it's filled with footsteps, clinking weapons, and grumbles about the worst sleep in centuries. Your back aches from sleeping on hard ground all night. Your limbs are stiff. Your head is pounding from using a metal helmet as a pillow, one with rivets. You sigh, sit up and brush dried mud from your sleeve, only to realize there's nowhere to wipe your hand. Not far from you, Peter, your tent mate, is still fast asleep. He's curled up, hugging his gear like it's the last warmth in this cold morning. His snores blend with the gentle rustle of dry grass beneath him. A few soldiers nearby are starting to stir, some crawling upright, others still clinging to the last scraps of peace. You get up and head toward the shared water bucket between two tents. The water is ice cold and slightly murky, but it's all you've got to wash your face. You scoop some up, splash it on, and instantly feel more awake than any pep talk could manage. It's cold, unforgiving. That's the medieval version of a morning routine. Back at the tent, you shove on your leather boots, damp and stiff after the long night. Every step reminds you that today will be no kinder than yesterday. You start putting on your armor. The underpadding is faded and a bit frayed. The outer armor is dented in spots, the straps a little loose, but you adjust and breathe steadily. You're used to this. The camp is getting louder. Someone curses about a missing glove. Another is searching for a spear they used to hang laundry last night. Someone spilled a pot of porridge and groans, not from hunger, but because the backup breakfast might be nothing. Always the first awake, the commander marches past the tents, barking orders. His voice is loud, commanding, and increasingly annoyed as he spots a soldier trying to squeeze into the wrong size boots. You stand tall, doing your best to look alert, though your stomach's growling and your head still feels halfway in a dream. People start lining up. Someone's forgotten how to strap their armor. A recruit is fumbling with their helmet. Another soldier stands there silently, gripping a dull sword, gazing out toward the distant hills where the morning mist lingers. You know what he's thinking. Everyone thinks the same thing on mornings like this. Will I make it through today? Soon, the horn sounds. Not exactly glorious, a bit wheezy, slightly off-key, but enough to signal that the day has begun, and that it might be someone's last. You tighten your straps, adjust your shield harness, and knock lightly on your sword. A little ritual for peace of mind. Taking a deep breath, you look up at the sky. The clouds haven't cleared. The air is damp and cold. You smell wood smoke, wet leather, and somewhere nearby, the faint scent of thin stew drifting from the cook tent. The commander yells again, familiar phrases like "for honor," "Zrenya," "for the king," "component placement," "for the peace of the realm." No one responds, not out of disbelief, but because everyone's just trying to stay upright and not fall asleep on their feet. You glance at Peter, awake and trying to buckle his gear backward. You help him fix it, and you share a small laugh. It's a little humor to start a long day, a little camaraderie, a little reminder of humanity among the steel and dirt. You don't know what's waiting for you ahead, but for now, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with people who are just as tired, anxious, and determined as you. And that, even if it doesn't make you stronger, is enough to keep you standing. After a night on the cold ground and a morning jolted awake by wood smoke and ice-cold face water, it's time to face a non-negotiable ritual before battle. Breakfast in the military camp. No fried eggs, no toast, no coffee. It is just a large gray pot. Whether the color comes from ash or the ingredients themselves is unclear. The cook, who's not a cook but a soldier who used to sharpen nails, ladles out heaping scoops of what's alleged to be soup. You stand in a long line, gripping a slightly cracked wooden bowl, praying you get served before the pot runs dry or the ladle breaks. When it's your turn, he gives you a portion. Inside the bowl is something like porridge but thinner. A few grains of barley, a tiny root fragment, and, if you're lucky, a piece of vegetable that hasn't fully dissolved. You sniff it. Not terrible, but unidentifiable. You take a cautious step back as if dealing with a newly invented chemical. You sit near the fire, or what's left, and start eating. Every spoonful is an adventure, sometimes bland, sometimes saltier than regret, sometimes filled with unidentifiable floaties that may or may not be tree bark. But in silence, you eat it all. Because if you don't eat, you'll be hungry. And if you're hungry, you'll be weak. And if you're weak, the battle won't even have to kill you. Next to you, Peter chews and grimaces. "What is this?" he asks, still unsure if the round chunk he bit into was a turnip or a stone. You chuckle. As long as it's not moving, it's edible. Breakfast unfolds in an atmosphere of half seriousness, half resignation. Some men adjust their sword straps while eating. Others sprinkle in a pinch of salt from home, hidden like treasure. One breaks a rock-hard loaf of bread by hand and dips it in the soup to soften. No one complains too loudly. Everyone knows. This is the best they're going to get. In the corner, someone is trying to relight the central campfire. Smoke drifts upward, mingling with the smell of soup and unwashed bodies to form a distinct scent no one can mistake. The smell of morning before battle. You drink the last soup and wipe your mouth with a cloth. You don't feel full, but at least you're not empty. You stand, rinse your bowl in the ashwater basin by the tent, place it back, and return to your prep area. An officer passes by with a roster board. He doesn't make eye contact. He just ticks names and nods. Someone asks, "Do we eat tonight?" He replies dryly, "Depends which side still has tents." That's his version of reassurance. Someone chuckles, and then someone else joins in. Not because it was funny, but because laughing is the fastest way to stay calm. Between gray soup and a dull sword, a laugh is the only weapon that might carry you for a few more hours. Peter pats your shoulder. "First time I've finished breakfast without asking what it was. I think I've matured." You nod, eyes drifting toward the misty hills. Still peaceful, but not for long. You check your armor, tighten the straps, wrap another layer of cloth around your wrist, not for protection, but to feel like you're doing something in your control. And you wait. The morning wind passes gently. Not enough to chill, but enough to remind you that time moves forward. Every second brings you closer to the fight. And the only thing you can do now is breathe, stand straight, and keep breakfast from coming back up for as long as possible. After a hearty breakfast that left only your stomach feeling warm, it's time to face the inevitable ritual. Preparing to march. The battle awaits. And you know, between now and when you lock eyes with the enemy, there will be no time to retie your laces or search for a loose piece of armor. You return to your tent, bending down to gather your belongings. There isn't much. A not-so-new sword, a dented shield, a leather water pouch, a few scraps of hard bread, and a cloth-wrapped image of the Virgin Mary. A gift from your mother before you left. You pack it all into your bag and fasten your belt. The motion is familiar now, but every time you tighten the strap, your chest sinks just a little. Around you, everyone's busy. One soldier sheaths his sword with sharp precision. Another wrestles with a suit of armor patched together with flax twine. Someone else stares off into the distance as if pondering the meaning of life or trying to remember where he left his other sock. Peter is always the last one out and fumbling with his helmet clasp. His face is tense and his hands tremble slightly. You help him adjust the strap and the two of you lock eyes for a moment. No words, none needed. A simple nod is enough. The signal horn sounds, this time more resolute, more clear. Officers walk between the tents, calling out groups by name. Your unit is 4th. Not the best, but not the worst either. They say the worst is Unit 6, where one guy once slept with his shield because he was afraid of being robbed at night. You and your comrades quickly fall into line. Heavy boots thud against the damp earth, creating a strange rhythm. Steady, slow, thoughtful. Overhead, the sky is still overcast. The wind moves through the rows of tents, fluttering the canvas like punctuation marks written by fate. No one knows what lies ahead. Only time has come to go. Your unit is 12 men. At the front is the captain, a tall, quiet man known for never removing his helmet in front of others. Rumor has it he lost his ears in a battle last year. Others say he never had ears to begin with. You're not sure, and you don't want to ask. The weapon check begins. Officers walk the line, inspecting gear. No excessive rust on blades. The armor must be fully secured. Shields must at least be holdable. Someone is told to rebuckle their armor because it's on backward. Another is asked to change boots because the soles are falling apart. Though honestly, everyone's boots are falling apart. He just makes a squelching sound with every step. Once inspection ends, you're ordered to move to the front line. Not where immediate combat will happen, but the waiting position. An open field past the tree line, where the air already smells. Anxious. On the way, you catch fragments of hushed conversation. One soldier tells of a battle 2 years ago, where a swarm of bees attacked the troops before they even set out. Another talks about enemy soldiers, supposedly strong, dangerous, but just as scared as anyone. You say nothing. You think of your village, the church bell. Early mornings carrying water with your father. A distant tenderness threads through your thoughts, like a single string connecting you to a quieter world that feels impossibly far away. A gust of wind carries the scent of smoke from the camp. Charcoal, damp leather, and metal, blended into a scent unmistakably known as the smell of pre-battle morning. You march on with your unit. Each step is heavier than usual, because of armor, the mud caked on your boots, and thoughts you haven't quite formed yet. But with each step, you feel an invisible bond growing among those walking beside you. No one jokes, no one complains. Everyone is preparing for their moment. And you, standing in the middle of it all, can only breathe slowly, keep your mind clear, and keep walking. At the staging ground, you stop on command. The formation breaks. Some sit down to rest. A few sneak a bite of stale bread. One soldier closes his eyes, whispering something, maybe a prayer. You take off your helmet, wipe your sweat with your sleeve, and look up at the sky, where the first light of day has just broken over the distant horizon. The ground trembles lightly beneath your feet, not from an earthquake or the wrath of gods, but from over 200 people marching at once, clad in heavy armor, bearing shields, swords, spears, and a quiet unease pressed into their hearts. You are one of them, a link in a chain of soldiers moving toward the front. The journey isn't far, only a few miles, but with the weight of steel on your shoulders and mud clinging to your boots, every step feels stretched, as if the road ahead secretly unrolls itself a little farther with each footfall. The army moves in silence across the fields, through a sparse forest, toward a place the map calls rendezvous point, and the soldiers simply call the spot where things start to get serious. You match the steady rhythm of the march, your breath slipping past a coarse cloth tied over your mouth. Cold air snakes through gaps in your armor. The sky is overcast, and a mist still clings to the grass. The ground is soft and uncertain underfoot. Mud and tiny stones conspire to keep you off balance. Every slip jolts your heart, but you keep moving. Up front, The captain occasionally turns to check formation. He doesn't speak, only signals with his hands. His gestures are sharp and efficient. They call him the Silent Shadow. Not because he can't talk, but because he knows that silence holds the line together in moments like this. Peter walks beside you, grunting whenever his armor shifts awkwardly on his back. "Wish it weren't this cold," he mutters. You nod. Cold beats heat. The armor doesn't scald your skin, and sweat doesn't pour like rain. The road cuts through a thin forest. Trees stand still, their fallen leaves carpeting the ground. The soldiers' footsteps on dried foliage sound like muffled war drums. Everything seems to slow. Birds call out now and then. A squirrel darts through the underbrush. Even a fleeting moment like that brings a strange calm. Then the trees fall behind. A clearing stretches out before you. In the distance, the horizon remains shrouded in fog. The commander signals a stop. You unbuckle your helmet and lean to stretch your back. Sweat has soaked your collar. Your feet throb, squeezed inside boots for what feels like hours. Someone hands out dry bread and water. You nibble a piece. It tastes like old bark. But no one complains. Everyone knows that you still have a chance if you can still eat. After 10 minutes of rest, the command comes again. Move. This time you cross the marshier ground. The mud is thicker. One soldier in your unit nearly falls as his foot sinks too deep. He's pulled up and patted on the back. No laughter, just quiet reassurance. Every stumble is a reminder. Armor is heavy, but losing your balance is heavier. You think of home, of that red dirt path behind your house where you once ran barefoot as a child. Those same feet are now wrapped in leather and iron, trudging through mud in a formation where no one speaks above a whisper. Someone starts singing. Just a simple folk tune. A couple of voices join in, then stop. Not because the song isn't good, but because something catches in the throat. You understand. Right now, every sound stirs feelings too easily. You don't know how much farther until camp. You only know you must keep going. Every step is a decision. Stop, and you risk danger. Go too fast, and you break formation. Fall behind, and you're alone. So you walk, not fast, not slow, just right. Just like someone trying to stay alive would. You hear voices when you reach higher ground, where the makeshift camp is being set. Another unit has arrived before you. Tents are going up, flags are planted, and tools are being handed out. You exhale with relief. At least today, there's a place to sit. Maybe soup. Maybe a night without fighting. An officer points to a patch of open land. Unit 4, set up here. You and your comrades move quickly. Erect tents, hammer stakes, and divide sleeping spots. Your hands shake from cold and exhaustion. But you keep working, because it must be done. When everything is in place, you sit down, pull off your boots, and stretch your legs. The ground beneath you is still damp, but it feels like a reward compared to the rest of the morning. You glance around. Everyone looks tired, but not broken. They're still breathing and still walking. And like you, they haven't given up. You thought that after marching for hours through forests, mud, and the full-body ache that makes your knees whisper curses, you'd arrive at something resembling an organized resting area. But no. What greets you is a patch of uneven earth, no shade, no stream, and indeed no peace to be found. This is where you're ordered. Set up camp here, and you know, this will be your home, at least until the war horn blows. The ground is soft like porridge, yet mixed with rocks, dry mud, and something unidentifiable. Maybe a root, perhaps someone's old bone. You bend down and start unloading your gear. Your armor is heavy, soaked in sweat, and smells like a blend of horsehide, salt, and road dust. You take it off slowly, trying not to tear your underlayer more than the thorns already did. Peter drops his pack in front of you, then slumps to the ground like he just climbed a mountain. This place looks decent, he pants. You glance around. Some tufts of grass, a lonely bush, and a relatively fresh pile of horse dung. Yeah, real decent, you smile faintly. First task, pitch the tent. It's not big, not nice, and not waterproof. But when you've spent 2 nights in the rain wrapped in a cloak, a rough canvas with ropes is a gift. Each team gets a bundle: wooden stakes, fabric, and 1 long rope. You and Peter team up with 2 others, stretch the rope, hammer stakes, tie fabric, and then wedge rocks around the edge to block the wind. No one talks much. Everyone knows that noise doesn't boost morale right now. It just delays dinner. After nearly an hour, your team's tent stands, lopsided, wrinkled, 1 stake leaning, but enough to crawl into and stay dry, if it doesn't pour too hard. And that's high living in wartime. You step inside and check the ground. A layer of dry grass, straw beneath it, and a thick cloth. It is not a mattress, but after sleeping on gravel, it feels like heaven. You pick the left corner, less rocky, and toss your bag down as a pillow. Peter sits beside you, pulls off his boots, rubs his blistered feet, and groans. After pitching the tents, each group is assigned to a cooking rotation. Today, yours is spared, so you get a short break. But then someone calls out, "Anyone wants to wash up, get water from the forest edge." 1 bucket's for drinking, the others, not. Use the top half. You get up and follow. There's a small stream, water slightly yellow but clear, flowing over mossy stones. 2 buckets rest nearby. 1 for drinking, 1 for everything else. You pick wisely. You feel lighter after washing your face, rinsing your hands, and dampening a cloth for your neck. The scent of trees, the sound of water, and the breeze on your skin remind you that you're still human, not just an armored ghost. Evening settles slowly. The sky remains gray, but the light softens. Everyone gathers near the central fire. A few stories start to surface: home tales, old memories, silly village gossip. Someone mentions burning bread once and blaming the cat. Another recalls slicing their sleeve the first time they held a sword. No one laughs loudly, but eyes soften. People need that normalcy, a soft pillow and a nightmare-filled sleep. Dinner is served: vegetable soup, dry bread, and a sip of water. Not filling, but warm. And more importantly, no gravel in your teeth. When night falls entirely, you crawl into the tent. Insects chirp. The wind is calm. You lie down, eyes on the fabric ceiling, breathing quietly. Peter's already asleep. Someone nearby breathes steadily. Outside, the guards change shifts, their steps firm and careful. You close your eyes, hoping to grab some rest before tomorrow begins. A new day, with a battle no one can predict. But for now, you just need sleep. And tonight might be a good night as long as your back avoids that big rock and your legs don't cramp. The next afternoon brings no sun, no rain, just a flat gray light spread evenly across the camp. The kind of weather people call emotionless. A gentle breeze drifts through, the scent of damp grass still clinging to the air, and in your stomach, a polite emptiness is beginning to grow impatient. The good news is that today, Squad 4 gets lunch first. The bad news is that today's lunch is gray soup. You hear this while tightening your armor straps. Peter walks over, wooden bowl in hand, face caught between resignation and forced optimism. "Hey, there's vegetables today," he says, holding out the bowl. You glance down. The liquid inside looks like thin mud, dotted with a few greenish things of uncertain origin. The smell is not exactly unpleasant, but it is not something that stirs hope either. You grab your portion and head toward the central fire. Everyone's seated in a vast crescent, lifting bowls and starting their midday meal with the air of people participating in some ancient ritual no one remembers the reason for. You stir the soup gently. It's not thick, not watery, and not identifiable. It could be cabbage, it could be dry leaves, it could be whatever was left in a supply sack after 2 days of marching. But you eat, spoon by spoon. Not because it tastes good, because eating means surviving. Peter bites into something crunchy, frowns, and then swallows. "This might be a turnip, or a soft rock," he mutters. You chuckle, not because the joke is hilarious, but because the air around you needs laughter. Nearby, a soldier tries to enhance his soup with a pinch of salt from a tiny pouch tied to his belt. A family heirloom, no doubt. Everyone watches like he's performing a magic trick. Someone sighs wistfully. You eat slowly, stretching each bite like a brief escape from reality. Every spoonful becomes a quiet moment. No fighting, no marching, no thinking. Just you and a bowl of gray soup beneath a hazy sky and fading trees. As lunch winds down, someone starts a story. Not about battles, about home, childhood. The first time, they held a hoe instead of a sword. One person mentions their cat. She's probably lying on the kitchen roof right now, soaking up the sun. Another recalls the village market, where soup had colors other than dirt. The stories spread gently, without aim. You share too, about a family dinner, the smell of fried shallots in a pan, and the time your mother punished you for skipping school to swim in the river. Someone laughs, not loudly, but warmly. Then someone murmurs, "If this is our last lunch, might as well finish it." It's not a sad line, just a practical one. Everyone nods, no one disagrees. Afterward, you wash your bowl at the edge of the field kitchen, a murky bucket beside a few shared clothes. A quick rinse, then you hang it on the drying rope stretched between two tent poles. Simple. Routine. No instructions are needed, and no discussion is required. Just small rhythms to keep life moving in a place where nothing is specific. The afternoon slides by. No fighting. No news. It's just time drifting past like thin smoke. You stretch your back and settle in a shaded patch. One person sharpens their blade. Another patches a bootstrap. Someone dozes off, helmet resting on their chest like a tiny blanket. Peter leans against a tent post, eyes half closed. "Hope there's no fighting tomorrow," he murmurs. You don't answer. Not because you disagree, but because you're thinking the same thing. As the sun fades, a breeze stirs the air, carrying the scent of soil and the whisper of wind across the canvas. You glance at the sky. There's not much to see. But you know, the rest time is nearly over. And this evening might bring the first briefing for a real battle. You stand and stretch. Though short-lived, the faint warmth from the gray soup is enough to lend you a little strength. That bland, colorless bowl didn't bring happiness, but it reminded you that you're still here. Still moving, and still marching forward. As the sun dipped behind the distant hills, the last light of day faded into cold gray clouds. The camp fell into that hazy state between silence and anticipation. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew tonight would be long. You lie inside the tent. The space is cramped, far from comfortable, but warmer than the open air. Your armor lies neatly beside your head, your weapon within reach. The cloth beneath your back is rumpled, and you suspect you're resting on a sharp stone. But at least you're near the edge of the tent, less likely to be kicked if someone tosses in their sleep. Peter has been lying down for a while now, one arm under his head, eyes open and fixed on the fabric ceiling. No one's in the mood to talk, not out of tension or resentment. Just sleep won't come. Outside, footsteps echo, the guards pacing around the perimeter. The tent walls flutter gently in the breeze. Further out, you hear a horse pawing at the ground, metal jingling on reins, and now and then, a solitary sigh from someone failing to hide their unease. You close your eyes, trying to relax. But your mind doesn't obey. It replays the morning. The trumpet call. The murmured orders between officers. The whispered rumors that tomorrow could be the real thing. You shift. So does Peter. Neither of you speaks, but you understand that sleep won't come easy tonight. The wind whistles through the tent and seems to tell stories. Not fairy tales, but truths. Stories of cold, worry, and what it feels like to lie this close to the earth and still not feel safe. A few soldiers in nearby tents begin to whisper prayers. Nothing loud or formal, just soft, familiar phrases, repeated like breathing. You don't pray, but you listen. There's peace in the rhythm of their voices, like each word is a thread holding someone's thoughts together. Then comes a chuckle. A hushed story follows, about someone who once drank too much corn wine and accidentally called his wife by his ex's name. No loud laughter, just stifled snorts and breathy amusement. A little warmth in the dark. You glance at Peter. He's smiling faintly. "Didn't think stories could feel this comforting," he whispers. You nod gently, as if afraid to wake yourself. Time doesn't pass by the clock anymore. It drips by in breaths, in rustling fabric, in scattered night sounds. Every time you close your eyes, morning pushes back into your mind. Every time you start to drift, your heart taps out a different rhythm, reminding you you're not ready. No one will wake you. There are no bells. But you know, you'll fall behind if you fall too deep asleep. And here, falling behind could mean falling for good. You open your eyes, breathe slowly, and place your hand on the hilt of your sword, not to draw it, just to feel it still there like an anchor in a sea of thoughts. The wind shifts. It carries campfire smoke and mist. A sharp, earthy scent, but familiar. You inhale and exhale, and your eyelids begin to feel heavier. I have not slept yet, but I closed. Peter shifts again. I used to think war meant shouting, swinging swords, charging in. But now I think maybe war starts with one long, sleepless night. You don't answer. Because at that moment, at last, you begin to drift off. Not deeply, not fully, but into a light dream where you wear no armor, hold no sword, and walk barefoot through tall grass. A dream is not long, not vivid, but just enough to remind you that even now, people still need to breathe, pause, and simply be. Dawn didn't knock gently at your tent with soft light or birdsong. No. Dawn in the military camp came as a harsh trumpet blast, more like a dying whistle than a melody, cutting through the morning fog like a reminder. Dream time's over. Get up and deal with survival. Your eyes snapped open. They stung from a shallow sleep. Your body was stiff, twisted from spending the night curled on your side. Peter was still lying, but you could hear his breath, fast and shallow. Then he sat up suddenly, blinking at you slowly, not awake but remembering. Today was that day. "It's time," he whispered, as if saying it louder would make it happen faster. You nodded. Your throat was dry. You reached for your water pouch and took a small sip. It was warm and tasted like leather, but who cared? The only words in your mind now were, "Get ready." Outside, the camp stirred to life. Low voices, the clinking of armor. Footsteps are growing heavier and more deliberate. There was a different air in the tents now. No stories, no chuckles, only preparation. You suited up again, one layer at a time, one strap at a time. Your hands moved out of habit, but slower today, more carefully. Everyone seemed to understand that every buckle and strap might be the difference between a bruise and a fatal wound. Peter was strapping on his sword, fingers trembling slightly, eyes steady. You helped tighten the belt for him and gave his shoulder a light tap. No need for words. The gesture was enough. You stepped outside. The sky was still dim. The ground was damp. A sharp wind crept into your sleeves. Your breath and the breath of every soldier rose in little gray clouds. No one spoke. Everyone moved in their quiet orbit. A commanding officer climbed onto a slight rise and signaled for assembly. Soldiers fell into line, straight rows, heads down, shields slung, weapons in hand. Names were called. Answers returned. Everyone was present. No one had run. Whether that was loyalty, fear, or just not knowing where else to go, you couldn't say. But they were here. You glanced toward the horizon, where a pale gold light crept beneath the clouds. It was beautiful in a plain, quiet way, but you knew that that peaceful field would become something else entirely in a few hours. The officer spoke. "It's just loud enough. No rally cries, no speeches, just instructions. Hold formation, follow orders, don't break rank." He ended with a sentence barely louder than the breeze. The only thing you have to do today is survive. You heard it, but your mind wandered. To your mother tying a scarf around your neck before work in the fields, to lazy afternoons by the river, to the smell of soup under a wooden eave on rainy nights. Small things. But suddenly, this morning, they felt like the most precious things in the world. The order came. Move out. Not into battle, just to the staging point. But even that made your heartbeat spike. You adjusted your shield, tightened your grip on your sword, and stepped into line. The ground was soft beneath your boots. Each step made a soft thunk like walking through the wet cloth. No music, no drums. Just breathing. Just metal brushing metal. Just the quiet roar of thoughts in everyone's heads. You glanced at Peter. He was walking in sync, not looking your way but gripping the hilt of his sword like letting go might break everything. Around you a few soldiers muttered to themselves. Prayers, maybe. Or promises. Or just words to fill the silence. You kept walking. The morning wind faded. The sky brightened from gray to soft orange. And then, faintly, for the first time, you heard another trumpet. And it wasn't ours. You stand motionless in formation, hand resting on your sword hilt, helmet lowered, face half hidden behind a steel mask. Everyone around you is ready. But no one speaks. No one moves much. The entire line seems frozen in this misty morning, waiting for something or someone. Heavy footsteps echo behind you. You don't need to turn. The commander has arrived. He doesn't appear often in the camp. Usually orders are relayed through captains or ranking officers. But today is different. Today is not a drill. Today is the day. He steps in front of the ranks, carrying no sword, not in full armor, only a thick cloak, collar high, dust clinging to the edges. He scans each soldier slowly. No words at first, just a calm gaze, tired perhaps, but unwavering. Then he speaks, not loud, not dramatic, but with a voice low and steady, just enough to be heard by every man. You've marched far. You've endured rain, cold, little food, and shorter sleep. And now you stand at the final line, either to live and tell the tale, or leave it for others to tell. No one laughs, but every eye locks onto him. Even without words, you feel everyone listening, not just with their ears, but their entire being. I can't promise this battle will be fair, he continues, unshaken. I can't promise we'll all return, but I can promise this. If any unit is brave enough to face what's ahead, it's you. A soft wind blows. The banner on its pole flutters in dawn. You still haven't moved, but your heart slows. His words steady your rhythm like a hand on the reins. We don't have the best armor. We're not the largest army, but we know why we're standing here. He pauses. Eyes drift out toward the fog-shrouded field stretching to the horizon. Out there, he says, they're scared too. They miss home too. They prayed last night, same as you. But they don't have us. They didn't march through frost, through mud, through every slow step, only to still be standing here. You feel your spine straighten, not because you were told to, but because something struck your core. You want to stand taller. And if this is the last time we line up together, the last time we raise our swords side by side, then let it be a day history remembers. A silence follows. Not tense, unified, no applause, no cheering. But something has shifted. The air no longer presses as it did at dawn. The fear hasn't vanished, but it no longer swallows you whole. Because now you know you are not alone. The commander steps back. No final flourish. There was no request for applause, just a slight nod. Then he turns and walks away with the same calm pace he arrived. Like a man who's just laid a cornerstone of belief and now trusts the wall to build itself. Peter turns to you and murmurs, "Pretty sure I won't faint when the fight starts anymore." You glance at him. Say nothing. Just tap the edge of his shield with a firm clang, your way of saying, You'll be fine. You breathe in deep. This time, not out of fear, but readiness. The morning breeze carries the scent of wild grass and damp, sweat-soaked iron. Not pleasant, but real. You stand in formation, heartbeat steady again, and you know, whatever comes next, you will not face it alone. Waiting for battle is a strange experience. No one ever told you what it would feel like. No one mentioned that the moment between ready and begin could stretch unbearably long. After the general's speech, you and your unit were ordered to move to the staging area, a lower patch of land a few hundred paces from the main camp, right at the edge of the grassy field ahead. The map calls it the projected front line. Soldiers call it the place where it gets real. You march in formation. No jostling, no jokes. Everyone keeps just enough space between one another. Occasionally, someone adjusts a strap on the front man's armor. Occasionally, someone whispers, "How much longer?" But no one has an answer. You and Peter are in the third row from the right, near the center of the formation. In front of you are two tall, silent men. Behind you, a few green recruits. Their shoulders twitch. Their eyes fixate on the distant field as if trying to imagine something more concrete than a battle. You stand, knees slightly bent, back straight, shield raised to your chest, helmet secured. The morning light angles sideways, casting long shadows across the damp earth. A breeze rustles the grass, and the whole scene feels oddly like a rehearsal for a play that hasn't been written yet. All around, the soft clang of metal on metal sounds like wind chimes, gentle but never peaceful. Someone coughs, someone exhales, but no one moves much. Everyone is holding their place, holding their nerve, holding their minds from drifting too far. Peter leans his head slightly and murmurs, "I think waiting might be worse than the fighting." You don't reply, because you're thinking the same thing. You look out across the field, movement, figures, flags fluttering. The enemy is forming ranks too. Not close, but close enough to know they're watching you back. An officer on horseback rides slowly along the line, inspecting. As he passes, you keep your gaze forward, not out of fear, but because all your focus is wrapped around controlling the pace of your heartbeat. The sun climbs higher. Sweat gathers at the nape of your neck, soaking the padded cloth beneath your helmet. Your throat itches, but you can't scratch. And for a moment, you think of the cool, damp cloth your mother used to lay across your forehead when you were sick. There are no clothes now, no mother, only sweat and steel. Another command cuts through the silence. Hold formation. Do not move without the signal. The voice travels like a taut rope stretched from the commander's lungs to the soles of every boot in the dirt. You exhale slowly. Nothing changes. And it's precisely that which unsettles you most. No drums, no war cries, just silence, thick as fog, hanging in the moment before everything happens. Or doesn't. A lone bird calls above. You look up, not because you care, but because everything else is too tense to stare at. Peter speaks again, oddly calm. "If I live through this, first thing I'm doing is take a hot bath, eat a hunk of meat, and sit completely still for 3 days." You smile, not because it's funny, but because smiling, like breathing, is one of the few things keeping your mind tethered to now. Someone cracks their knuckles. Another shrugs and resettles their shoulders. Tiny rituals are a defense against the overwhelming unnormalness of the moment. You glance across the field again. The enemy ranks still haven't moved. Maybe they're waiting for a signal too. Maybe they're just as nervous as you are. Time drips. 5 minutes? 20? No one knows. Here, time isn't measured in minutes but in breaths. And then, a drum beat. Not loud, but unmistakable. A resounding, steady thump from your side. Not the call to charge, just a signal. Be ready. Focus. Await the final command. You grip your shield tighter. Your palm is cold, even though the day has warmed. Your heart beats slower now, not from calm, but because your body conserves its last ounces of energy for what's next. You glance at Peter. He's ready too. Neither of you speaks. You don't need to. Everything has already been said, in the way you hold your sword, in the rise and fall of your breath, in the flicker of a glance that says, "If we go down, we go together." The second drumbeat echoed, deeper, firmer, and just like that, the heavy silence shattered, like a rope snapped clean through. The commander at the front raised his arm. You saw it tremble, not from fear, but from having held it up too long in the cold morning air. And then, his hand dropped. The order to charge was shouted. You stepped forward, not running, not yelling, and just walking, precisely as you'd practiced hundreds of times. But this time, it wasn't on a training field, and it wasn't in a village square. This was a real battlefield with real enemies, and every weapon around you was drawn not for show, but for blood. The synchronized thudding of boots against the earth created a sound unlike anything you'd heard. It wasn't loud. It wasn't furious. It was simply real. Like rain falling steadily on a thatched roof, like the groan of oxen pulling through deep soil. But this field held only grass and fear instead of furrows and crops. Your formation moved forward slowly, keeping lines tight. No one broke stride. You felt the bodies beside you, shoulders, elbows, feet, moving like one great wooden machine. Your hand clenched tighter around your sword hilt, not out of panic, but because your body needed something to believe in. Peter was beside you, exhaling sharply. He said nothing, but you could hear his breath, boots, and rhythm. Somehow it steadied you. The enemy formation was now just a few dozen paces away. You could see movement, flags waving. They were forming up too. Not too close yet, but close enough that you knew. They were watching you too. From their side, someone shouted. You couldn't make out the words. Maybe a battle cry, perhaps a name. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the waiting had ended. It was happening. Your officer called out, "Hold the line! Shields up! Do not retreat!" You raised your shield, lowered your stance. The ground underfoot was a little uneven. Your knees tensed but held, and then, impact. There was no cinematic clash. There are no dramatic sparks, just the raw sounds of metal striking metal, heavy breathing, boots skidding over wet grass. You raised your sword to parry a blow. The strike wasn't powerful, but jarred your arm and made your wrist ache. You didn't see your opponent's face. His helmet masked it, but you saw his eyes. Wide, hesitant. I am just as unsure as you. The battle wasn't chaos. It was a series of sharp, fast moments, one after another. A swing, a block, a retreating step, a raised arm. There wasn't time to think, only to survive. Protect your head, stay upright, keep Peter from going down. "Left side!" Peter shouted. You turned and saw an enemy soldier breaking toward the flank. You and Peter moved together. His sword blocked the first swing. Yours pushed back the next. No one was injured, but none of you were the same as you had been a minute before. Time warped during the fight. A single minute could stretch like an afternoon. One parried blow could seem to ring on forever. Then suddenly, from behind, trumpet blast. Not a signal of defeat, but a call to fall back and regroup. You stepped back in formation. No running, no turning. Just step by step, eyes forward. When you'd cleared enough distance from the enemy, you felt your breath rasping in your chest. Not from fatigue, but from the sudden realization that you were still alive. Peter was right beside you, blood soaking his shoulder. Not deep. You slipped an arm under him to help him toward the medics stationed behind the lines. No one groaned. No one asked questions. Everyone was too busy, breathing. You collapsed into the grass. You didn't take your armor off. Your hands were shaking, but your vision was clear. You had just survived the first minutes of a real battle, and you knew it wasn't over. But at least you had made it through the beginning. You're sitting in the middle of the field, your heart still pounding after that first clash. No one is talking, not because there's nothing to say, but because the exhaustion right now isn't in your arms or legs. It's in how your mind has to breathe just to keep up. The wind is still blowing. The sky is still gray. The grass beneath you is soaked with dew and blood. Not yours, but close. A soldier beside you is getting his shoulder bandaged. He isn't screaming, just grinding his teeth. The medic wraps the torn flesh with practiced hands, shaky but steady. Peter is sitting next to you, slumped against his shield, panting. Sweat trickles down his neck. His shoulder strap is torn, but the wound is just a scratch. You already checked. No deep cut, no infection. Lucky, you murmur. Peter nods but doesn't reply. An officer walks past, inspecting the line. Form up in fours, one step apart. No one leaves formation. You push yourself up, legs tingling, knees stiff. But you can stand. You still grip your sword like a walking stick for the soul. Everyone else begins regrouping. The formation is rebuilt. Not perfect, but standing. There are quiet gaps now, places where men didn't come back. No one asks. No names are read, just glances, and then eyes forward. You notice a young soldier fumbling with his armor. His eyes are unfocused, as if he's staring into a place that isn't there. A comrade beside him places a hand gently on his shoulder. No words. Just that. It's enough to bring him back. The commander steps forward, raising his hand for order. His voice is calm and even, just as before. We haven't lost. We haven't won. But we're still standing. And that alone is enough to make the other side nervous. No applause. Just a few solemn nods. Then everyone gets back to work. Tightening ranks, checking weapons, adjusting shields, getting ready for whatever comes next. Peter quietly adjusts his belt. You help fasten the strap behind his back. No one says it out loud, but you both know. These little acts matter more than 100 war cries. A group of soldiers joins from the left flank, folding into formation. They're muddy, red-eyed, but upright. One is chewing a piece of hard bread, probably his first bite all day. You watch and suddenly remember you haven't eaten either. You reach into your pouch and pull out a piece of bread hard as stone. Peter offers a pinch of salt. The two of you sit, eating while staring at the ground. It's not good, but it's enough. And right now, enough is something sacred. Someone nearby ties their bootlaces. Another wipes dried blood from his shield. A few officers walk the rows, offering short commands. If you're pushed left, follow the first signal. Don't break formation. Never charge alone without orders. You nod. You don't need to hear it all. Right now, everything runs on habit and instinct. Like farming. You don't need to relearn how to swing the hoe every time you walk into the field. You just need to remember why you picked it up. Peter turns to you and gives you a weak smile for the first time in hours. Still got all my teeth. You raise an eyebrow. But are they clean? Both of you chuckle. A short, awkward laugh, but the most human sound you've heard since morning. The wind picks up again. You pull your collar tighter and glance toward the enemy line. They're still out there, distant, faint through dust and mist, but you know, they're watching too. And chances are, they're doing exactly what you are. Checking shields, tightening straps, thinking of the ones next to them, and hoping they'll still be there after the next trumpet call. A horn sounds, not a charge signal, just a call to gather. But it's enough to jolt everyone upright, realigning the ranks. You step back into position and take a deep breath. Your lungs stretch, then sag like old leather. But they still work. No one knows when the next drumbeat will come. No one knows how often you'll charge, retreat, or stand again. But one thing everyone knows. While you're waiting, no one is allowed to fall. The third horn sounded, profound and decisive, like the opening note of a song without melody. And just like before, your body responded before your mind did. Feet forward, shield up. The formation moved as one, no shouting, just slow, steady, deliberate motion, like a heartbeat pushing forward. The atmosphere this time was different. The first clash had been the beginning. This one was real. No more doubt, no more holding back, and not much time left to wonder how you should feel about it. The field ahead looked the same but didn't feel the same. The grass was trampled, the mud churned, and the earth was soggy as if from a sudden rain. You saw scattered footprints, bits of armor and sword marks in the dirt, traces of those who had stepped before you. The impact wasn't soft when the two sides collided again. It was heavier, rougher. No more probing strikes, just full swings with whatever strength remained in your muscles. You raised your shield to block a charge from the right. The clang of metal echoed close. Your arm went numb for a second, but you didn't stop. You pushed back and swung your sword. It didn't land, but it forced your opponent to step back. Peter was holding the left flank, parrying and shouting something. Maybe left side, or maybe watch it. You couldn't tell. Sound in battle is never clear. Everything blends, boots sliding, frantic breathing, shouts, clanging steel, and the wind still blowing, indifferent to the war beneath it. The line began to stretch. Not everyone held formation. Some were pushed left. Others slipped, fell, and scrambled back up. Someone cried out for help, but you didn't turn. Not because you didn't care, but because turning now would mean leaving your post. A hard blow rocked you from the front. You staggered back and saw an enemy lunging. You swung, missed, but made him hesitate. A soldier beside you blocked for you. You returned to your position. It all happened in seconds, but felt as long as a prayer. You were getting tired, not from effort, from the inability to take a full breath. Every inhale was interrupted by action. Each breath carried an unfinished question. Someone fell right in front of you, a spear strike from afar. You helped him up. No name, no thanks expected. Just instinct, because if it were you, you'd hope someone would do the same. Peter retreated closer, face flushed from exertion. "Left's weak," he panted. You nodded, pulled him one step back, and angled your shield toward the left. Another filled in beside him. No orders are needed. That's when you realize people don't need many words in chaos, just the same rhythm. The clash dragged on like a prolonged rain. Not a storm, but relentless. Each hit was a drop. Each ragged breath, a quiet thunderclap. Strike, block, retreat, advance. Every movement had a purpose, even if you didn't know where it led. Then suddenly, a horn again. The signal to fall back. You didn't have time to exhale. You turned, shielded your back, and began retreating in formation. Falling back wasn't easier than advancing. The ground was slick, legs were aching, and eyes still had to watch behind. But you managed. No panic, no stumbling. Everyone turned and withdrew with the order. Back at the starting line, you dropped to your knees, not from injury. Your legs simply refused to stand. Your hand still gripped your sword, trembling. Sweat ran down your cheek, mixing with the smell of blood and smoke. Your throat was dry, but you didn't drink. You just breathed. Deep. Even. Peter slumped beside you, leaning against his shield. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp. "You're still here," he said. You nodded. "Yeah, so are you." And that was all that needed to be said. You're still sitting there, back against your shield, hand resting on the sword that, even now, trembles faintly in your grip. A faint streak of dried blood clings on its blade. Not much. No splatter like in the stories. But enough to tell you, you did it. For the first time in your life, you took a human life. Not because you wanted to, not because you hated him, but if you hadn't, the one lying in the dirt would have been you. It happened quickly. A brief moment between two breaths. He lunged. You raised your shield. He slipped. And in that moment, when you could have turned, stepped back, hesitated, you struck. The point of your blade pierced through the gap at his side. Not deep, but enough. He collapsed. No scream, no thrashing, just a choking sound, and then wide eyes staring at you. Startled, empty. You pulled your sword free and stepped back, almost instinctively. Your body still functioned, and your limbs still obeyed. but your heart was beating to a different rhythm. No one praised you. No one stopped to say, "Well done." Everyone was busy surviving their seconds. Only you stood there, sword warm in your hand, with the knowledge that something irreversible had just happened. Now, sitting back in the makeshift camp, you're still not sure if it was the right thing. You don't feel proud. You don't feel stronger. You just feel quiet. Like a space inside you has opened up, where the certainty of never having killed used to be. Peter doesn't ask what happened, but he glances at the blade in your hand, then briefly meets your eyes. Just 1 second. Then he looks away, says nothing. But you know, he understands. You set the sword down gently as if it might speak. You look at your hands. The blood on your gloves has dried and crusted into the folds at your knuckles. Not much, but you see it. A field medic passes by and hands you a canteen. "Drink," he says softly. You take it, sip. The water tastes faintly of leather, but it's cool. You nod in thanks. Then, silence again. In that silence, your mind replays his face. Not clearly, but the eyes. You remember the eyes. A flash of surprise, as if he couldn't believe that you, still barely a soldier, were the last thing he'd ever see. You think of your father. He once told you that hunting wasn't like war. When you kill a deer, it doesn't look at you like that. But when you kill a man, his eyes follow you home, sleep beside you, and sometimes appear in dreams to ask, "Why me?" You have no answer. Only the fact that you lived, and he didn't. Peter pulls out a bit of bread, breaks it in half, and offers you a piece. You take it and chew slowly. It doesn't taste like anything, but it helps your body remember that chewing matters. Eating is surviving, and survival needs a reason. "At first," Peter says, "I thought I'd feel proud if I killed someone. Like in the stories." He chews a bit more, then shakes his head. "But now, it doesn't feel like a story at all." You nod, slowly, then say, "Yeah." No one ever mentions how your hands shake after. The two of you sit in silence. A light wind passes through. Flags on wooden poles flutter. From the field kitchen nearby, firewood crackles like a distant whisper. A soldier walks past, shoulder bandaged. He nods at you. Don't ask. Don't pry. Maybe he did the same thing you did. Perhaps he's done it before. Or maybe he just knows some things don't need telling. You take a deep breath. Your chest still feels heavy, but lighter than before. You glance toward the field. Fewer people are moving around now. The day is leaning toward evening. The sun isn't visible, but its light stretches low, casting your shadow long across the grass. You know this won't be the last time. There'll be another clash. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight. And you know you can't sit here forever, staring with empty eyes and trembling hands. You reach down and pick up your sword. Wipe the blade with a scrap of cloth. Slide it back into its sheath. Stand up. Not quickly, but steadily. Evening falls slowly like a thick curtain being drawn across the sky. The camp no longer echoes with heavy footsteps or the beat of war drums. Instead, there are soft groans, cloth ripping into makeshift bandages, and hushed voices calling to each other through the fading twilight. You stand at the edge of the field infirmary, a strip of coarse fabric stretched between two wooden stakes, peering inside but not stepping closer. The air is thick with the scent of homemade antiseptic brewed from herbs, mingled with blood, sweat, and damp earth. It's not pleasant, but it's not terrible either, because that smell means someone is still trying to heal. Peter is slumped against one of the tent stakes, his wounded shoulder now carefully bandaged. His eyes are half closed, one hand still gripping the sword laid across his lap. Not asleep, just resting. By now, the line between sleeping and waking has all but disappeared. Inside, a soldier groans from a broken leg. Another lie pale and silent, clenching a blood-soaked cloth. A medic leans over, instructing an assistant. Hold the knee. That's it. Press down. Don't let the blood come too fast. You recognize someone lying in the far corner, Alain, from your unit. This morning, he was laughing at Peter's soggy bread. Now he lies motionless, eyes shut, his arm wrapped tightly in blood-stained cloth up to the elbow. Whether he's sleeping or passed out from exhaustion, you can't tell. You step closer, nod to the medic, and sit beside Alain. You don't speak. You don't touch him. Sometimes a silent presence is all someone needs. Outside, a small group is ordered to do a head count. There's a list. Someone reads names. Some get answered. Some do not. Those who don't answer, no one can say for sure. Maybe they're wounded and stuck somewhere. Perhaps they got separated. Or maybe they're gone. The general passes by, saying nothing. He looks at each person. His eyes pause on a few tents draped in black cloth, the sign for the fallen. Then he moves on. No instructions. No one has the strength for speeches now. You glance back at Peter. He opens his eyes slightly. "How many?" you whisper. He shakes his head. "Don't know. But the left side's got too many empty spots." This is a short sentence, but it is enough for you to picture that whole corner of the camp. Now just tent ropes, abandoned helmets, and blurred footprints in the mud. A young soldier stands by a small fire, holding the pouch of someone else. Maybe a friend, perhaps a brother. He carefully checks each item: a handkerchief, a small knife, a half-carved piece of wood. Then he places it all in a cloth box, ties it tight, and labels it with a name. No tears. Just quiet. Like a ritual everyone hopes they'll never have to perform. A boy soldier, no older than 16, recently rescued from the battlefield, sits curled up on a pile of dry grass. His arms hug his knees, eyes wide and unblinking. Someone places a blanket over his shoulders. He doesn't react, but he's still breathing, and that, for now, is enough. You hear a familiar name called 3 times. No answer. The record keeper quietly marks a small square. No red ink, no flowers, just one straight line of black, heavier than a church bell tolling through the evening air. Inside the tent, Alain stirs slightly. You turn. He opens his eyes and looks at you. Says nothing. You nod. He closes his eyes again and exhales more deeply. Maybe he'll be all right. Maybe not. But tonight, he's still here. And like so many others, that's the most you can hope for. Night falls completely. A forest bird calls in the distance. The wind slides across the fields colder than yesterday, but you feel a little lighter. Not because things are better, but because of the silence. Everyone is still here. The night in a military camp isn't like any night you've known. There are no lullabies, no comforting smells of dinner smoke, no complete dreams waiting beneath a soft blanket. It's a kind of suspended night, where everyone lies down, but no one truly sleeps. You're lying in the tent with Peter and 2 other soldiers. The 4 of you are silent, turned away from each other, no one groaning or speaking. But you know, each person is awake, each one chasing their tangled thread of thoughts, long and frayed like an old rope. The moon tonight gives little light, just a faint silver strip slipping through the edge of the canvas. Outside, the wind rustles gently through tall grass. Tent ropes creak against wooden stakes. Sometimes there's the snort of a horse from the makeshift stables or the faraway cry of an owl. Every sound is slight, but in the silence, they feel incredibly close. You close your eyes, then open them again. Then close them once more. Sleep never comes long enough to carry you under. Every time you're about to drift, a memory surfaces. The raised arm with the shield, the face of the man across from you, the swing of your sword, eyes widening. Everything replays in your mind like a hazy negative reel, forever unfinished. Peter shifts. Not the first time tonight. You hear him sigh softly. You don't ask, because you know, if your places were reversed, you wouldn't want to talk either. Someone in the tent begins to whisper a prayer. Not loud, It's not clear enough to make out the words. Just a string of familiar murmurs, trembling like wind through brittle branches. No one stops him, no one praises him, but the sound lifts a bit of the weight, pressing down on the silence. You look up at the tent ceiling. The canvas stretches at crisscrossing angles, casting faint shadows. Your heartbeat is steadier now, but your thoughts are not. They still refuse to rest. You think about those who didn't return today. Some you barely knew. Some were neighbors. Some had shared a thin bowl of soup with you just yesterday. You think about your village, the thatched roof of your house, the stone well where your mother washed vegetables, the wooden step where you used to split firewood. Every image appears strangely vivid, as if you remember a long-lost dream that suddenly came back in perfect detail. There are footsteps outside, soft and steady. A guard is making his rounds. They take turns walking through the night, never leaving the camp unattended. Every step is like a steady heartbeat among hundreds of minds that are anything but. Your eyes begin to sting. Not because you're crying, but because something inside you has been stretched too tight for too long. Someone coughs quietly in the tent. A slight sound, followed by a whisper. "Still awake?" Peter's voice. You whisper back, "Yeah." Then, nothing more. Peter doesn't say anything else either. Maybe just hearing someone answer is enough. Maybe like you, he only wanted to know he wasn't the only one lying awake. Time passes slowly. You don't know what hour it is, but you begin to feel wearier. Your body, finally, wants to rest. But your mind won't let it. You roll over, lying on your side, eyes closed once more. This time, you try not to picture the battlefield. You think instead of the garden behind your house, where you once planted mustard greens and once scolded a chicken for scratching up freshly sown seeds. You build the image piece by piece. The well, the woven basket, the smell of soil after rain. Your mother's voice calling from the kitchen. Your breathing starts to settle, slower, lighter. And then, as if someone gently pressed a hand to your forehead, sleep finally comes. Not deep, not long, but just enough to rest a while. Morning light crept into the edge of the tent like a late guest, aware it wasn't welcome, but still knocking gently. You opened your eyes, not because you'd truly woken, but because that bit of sleep hadn't been enough to be called real rest. Peter was still lying there, breathing evenly, one hand resting on his chest like he was holding on to a private dream. Across the tent, someone had already gotten up. You could hear the rustle of fabric as he tied his shoes in a whisper, like talking to himself more than to anyone else. You sat up. Your back ached, your neck stiff from a night curled on straw-covered ground. But you were alive, and right now, that was a gift in itself. Outside, the misty morning air made you shiver. The camp was still quiet. People began slowly stepping out of their tents as if each was waiting to see whether the sun would give them more hope today. The medic walked by, a list of the wounded in hand. His face wasn't sad, but it held no expression at all. It was the face of someone who had seen too much to be still surprised. You made your way toward the flickering campfire in the center of the grounds. A pot of water simmered gently above the coals. Someone had risen early to heat it. Not for food, but so that everyone could hold something warm in their hands. You poured yourself a bit, cradling the chipped clay bowl in both palms. It was only water. No herbs, no salt, nothing extra. But it was warm. And right now, warm was enough. Peter emerged from the tent, wincing slightly as he moved his shoulder. You handed him a bowl. He accepted it with a slight nod. No thanks needed. Every small act was already a complete sentence among those who had just survived the battle. A few young soldiers sat in a quiet cluster. They no longer looked panicked like they had yesterday, but in their eyes, you saw it, adulthood arriving too soon. The quartermaster passed by, handing out stale bread and the last scraps of salted meat. You took your share. You ate for the first time in 2 days without choking it down. It wasn't good, But it wasn't hard to swallow either. Your body was starting to understand that surviving isn't just not dying, it's learning how to keep going. Farther off, someone was mending the strap on a breastplate. Another was fixing the lining of his helmet. These small, practical tasks felt like a way to keep life from slipping too far out of reach. You pulled out a cloth and began wiping down your sword. The blade still bore dried streaks of blood. You didn't rush. You cleaned it slowly, one stroke at a time. It was as if you were washing away a part of what your mind wasn't ready to hold. A name was called out from the direction of the medic station. A man ran over and babbled with the healer. Then, relief. Someone thought lost was still alive. You didn't know who, but you saw a small group exchange quiet shoulder taps. No cheering, just a ripple of shared breath, held in since last night. The commander passed through the camp. No cloak, just his padded gambeson, high-collared, hair tousled by the morning wind. He didn't speak. He simply walked, nodding to a few men, pausing at tents with black cloth draped across them, bowing his head briefly and moving on. His wordless presence was like the morning light itself, not promising anything, but not abandoning anyone either. Peter stood next to you, sipping more of the warm water. "You think we'll fight again today?" he asked. You didn't know, but you weren't as anxious as yesterday, because today you were familiar with the waiting. Someone pulled out a bamboo flute and played a few quiet notes. Not a song, just a few drifting tones in the morning mist, but they softened the whole camp. Someone chuckled. Another soldier whistled back. No one stopped them. The sun began to show more clearly. Pale gold spilled across the grass, still stained from yesterday. But the light didn't try to erase anything. It just kept shining. And those who survived kept living. One slow step. One quiet word. One full bowl of hot water at a time. The morning passed like a silent mist. Unhurried, unbroken, and offering no signs of what would come. You sat by the fading fire, hands wrapped around a cooling bowl of warm water. The wind had shifted, carrying the scent of burnt wood, damp earth, and the faint trace of dried iron from the swords nearby. Then, a low murmur rippled across the camp. 3 names aren't on the list anymore. They're gone. Deserters. You heard the word, not surprised, but not untouched either. You glanced over at Peter. He was whittling the grip of his sword with a small knife, head tilted, eyes fixed on the blade. "Figured someone would bolt," he said. "Who wouldn't be scared?" No one knew who the 3 were until a new list was pinned to a wooden board at the center of camp. Their names were still there, no lines through them, no official marks, just a single handwritten note below. Missing. There was no talk of manhunts, no raised alarms. A few officers walked the camp quietly, peeking into tents and asking questions in hushed tones. Everyone simply shook their heads. A neutral shake, not accusatory, not protective. Just quiet. You remembered last night, just before dusk. A young soldier passed you saying he was heading to the edge of camp for a bit of air. You hadn't thought twice. Now, he might have been one of the 3. No one knew whether they left out of fear or because they couldn't stand another night like the last. Maybe they lost someone in the fight. Perhaps the stench of blood clinging to their collar became too much. Maybe they just wanted to live and couldn't see life waiting for them here. One wounded man inside the medic's tent muttered, "I thought about running too. But with a leg like this, guess I was meant to stay." It wasn't bitter, but it wasn't resignation either. Peter looked toward the tree line beyond the camp. "If it were me," he said slowly, "I'd leave when the moon rose. Wind at my back, grass tall enough to hide in. No one would notice." He paused, scratching his head. "But I think if I left, I'd never be able to look myself in the mirror again." You stayed silent, because the truth was, you didn't know what you'd do if you were in their place. You didn't feel angry or betrayed, just sad. The kind of soft, quiet sadness you feel when you find a broken bowl in the kitchen, and no one admits they dropped it. That afternoon, the commander didn't bring it up. The general didn't call for a complete assembly to scold or punish. No collective discipline. No threats. Just silence, drawn over the camp like a thick cloth covering everyone's thoughts. People kept doing what they were doing. Repairing boots, patching armor, cooking rations, dressing wounds, redrawing the battle map, as if the three who left were already folded into the background noise of war. Everyone knew that some don't leave the battle because they're weak, but because they've already carried too much. Someone lit more firewood that night, and a few soldiers gathered around the flames. One told a story about his days as a potter. Another talked about the first time he traveled more than 3 miles from his village. You listened without speaking, but you felt your chest grow lighter. Not because anything said was funny, but because everyone was still here, still present. I'm still choosing to stay. You didn't know what had happened to the deserters. Maybe they found safety. Perhaps they were hiding in a cave. Maybe they were captured. But you didn't hate them. You only thought, if you ever met them again, you'd hand them a bowl of water and sit quietly beside them. No questions, no judgment, just space to breathe, as someone still alive. The moon rose late. The camp fell into its usual rhythm. Steady breathing, quiet turning, a few final whispers before fading into dreamless rest. You lay down, pulling a thin blanket over your chest, eyes fixed on the canvas above. You didn't know if someone else might leave tomorrow, but you knew one thing. You were still here, at least for tonight, among those who remained. The fourth morning after the battle arrived without much warning. The sky was still overcast. No rain, but the wind cut sharp. You sat on a damp log, your back against a bare tree. A crumpled scrap of paper and a small piece of cooled charcoal were in your hand. An officer had passed by earlier and said, "Today, there's someone delivering letters back home." On horseback, just one rider took the long way around with a satchel full of letters and a sealed list of names. You stared at the scrap of paper. It used to be a page from an old ledger, ripped out, the back still faintly lined with faded writing. But the front, where you were about to write, was blank, waiting to be filled with something that felt both true and light. You took a breath, let it out slowly, and began writing. "Dear Mother, I'm still alive. The fact that I can write this is already a blessing, right? The battle was 3 days ago. Half of us remain. But I'm still here, sitting by the fire, filthy, sore, and a bit smelly, but breathing just fine. Peter's still here too. Remember Peter? The one who always naps? He took a wound to the shoulder, but it's been stitched up. He still eats 2 pieces of bread like nothing ever happened." You paused. I flipped the charcoal around. Continued. "Yesterday, 3 men deserted. No one chased them. No one cursed them. Around here, everyone understands that some fears can't be held in a sword hand. Some can bear it. Some can't. But we all carry something heavy as stone, just invisible to everyone else. I killed someone, Mother. I don't know his name. Just remember that when I struck, he looked at me like he wanted to ask, why? But didn't have time. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel disgusted. Just tired. You'd understand that feeling. Like the time Father had to butcher the sick pig before winter. No one wanted it. But we wouldn't have made it through if he hadn't done it." You stopped writing. The wind carried the smell of smoke and the soft clinking of metal from the armor repair tent. In the distance, 2 soldiers were chuckling over the last piece of crusty bread still in its wrapper. You wrote on, "Mother, I miss home more than ever. I miss the well behind the kitchen where I used to wash my hair in summer. I miss the pumpkin vines bending the fence under their weight. I miss the warm coals on your stove and the thin soup you made with turnips and pork fat. Don't worry about me. I'm eating. I sleep little, but I try. When I close my eyes, I picture you watering the garden or Father splitting wood. The thoughts are so familiar they lull me to sleep. Maybe that's enough for now. Peter stepped beside you and glanced down at the paper. "Who you writing to?" he whispered. "To my mother," you replied. He nodded. "Tell her I still have both legs, both arms, and I'm still arguing about everything, so I must be all right." You smiled, then added another line. "Peter sends his regards. He's still mumbling nonsense and sighing every morning, so I figure nothing's seriously wrong with him." You folded the letter carefully and tied it with a thin string like it was something precious. Then you handed it to the letter courier, a lean, quick boy sitting atop a light brown horse. He took it gently, tucked it into his large leather pouch, and nodded. No promises are needed. Just a look that said, "I'll take it. Far. Far." As the courier rode out, everyone turned to watch. No one waved, no cheers. But inside, each person quietly sensed something of themselves with that fading silhouette. Because in a place like this, sometimes a small letter is the only fragile thread that ties you back to real life. The one with seasons, hearths, warm beds, and people waiting. You returned to your seat and drank the last warm water from your bowl. And you felt your chest a little lighter, as if you'd mailed away a piece of your worry. And now you could breathe a little easier, at least for today. That night, you were called for patrol. No warning, just a quiet voice outside the tent as you were about to curl up in your old straw blanket. 4th unit, your shift. 1 guard every 10 steps. Follow the northern tree line. You sat up and pulled on your thin coat. The wind outside wasn't skin-cutting cold, but cold enough to make anyone hesitate before leaving their warm blanket. Peter groaned softly in the tent. "Heading out already?" You nodded, patting his shoulder. "I've got the first shift." You sleep. You stepped outside, a small shield slung over your shoulder, your sword strapped across your back. Not because you expected to fight, but because it was the rule. "No patrols with empty hands," your captain once said. The night was dark, but not pitch black. A crescent moon hung low, just enough light to walk without a torch. The wind whispered through tall grass and dry trees along the edge of camp. The ground beneath your boots was soft, mud mixed with wild grass, and something rustled in the leaves. Probably a squirrel, or wind, or your imagination. You walked with 3 others, spaced a few steps apart. No one spoke, only the soft crunch of boots on the soil and steady breaths. Now and then, someone would signal, "Left, hold, look," with practiced gestures learned in your first week at camp. Night patrol wasn't about fighting, it was about watching over the quiet. You weren't hoping for an encounter. You were hoping the path stayed empty, and the only sounds were rustling leaves and your breath. You remembered what an old soldier once told you. The scariest thing on night patrol isn't the enemy. It's when nothing happens, and your mind starts filling in the silence. You figured he was right. Halfway around the camp, your group paused for a short rest. No one complained, but everyone stretched their legs, rolled their wrists, and glanced around as if trying to spot something, though there was nothing but shadows and still grass. One man pulled a scrap of bread from his pocket and chewed slowly. Another exhaled sharply, trying to chase off the unease clinging to his collar. You just listened. The wind in the trees, the soft breathing of horses in the distance, the faint creak of wood from the camp behind you. Nothing unusual happened on your patrol, but every step felt heavier than any walk you'd taken, not from fear, just that everything carried more weight in the dark. You turned to the man next to you. His name was Marcel. They used to be a grain storekeeper. He whispered, "I used to be terrified of mice. Now, I see one, and I don't even blink." You chuckled softly. "Now we're only scared of people." Marcel nodded. I didn't say more, a straightforward sentence, heavy as a midnight prayer. When you reached the camp gate, the sentry nodded. No questions. You and your group returned your shields, undid your coat straps, and drifted off in different directions. No one said goodnight, because everyone knew sleep wasn't simple anymore. You returned to your tent. Peter was still lying there, but his eyes were open. "How was it?" he asked quietly. "Nothing happened," you replied, unlacing your boots. "All quiet." "Too quiet is scary too," Peter mumbled. You didn't respond. Just wrap yourself in the blanket, eyes on the tent ceiling. 1 hour of patrol, 3 men beside you. Over 2,000 steps, not a single shout, not a single enemy. But inside you, something felt both heavier and lighter. Patrols aren't meant to find anything. They're meant to prove peace exists, if someone's willing to guard it. Day 5 since the Great Battle. The air was still cold, and the camp still carried the same heavy silence that had settled in nights before. But this morning, as you stepped out of the tent, something in the air felt off. The fire huddled Peter, dry bread in his mouth, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of water, eyes squinting with mischief. You frowned. "What?" He nodded toward a corner of the camp. "Just look." You followed his gaze. On the captain's shield, someone had drawn, using charcoal, a crude, lopsided face, round head, crossed eyes, a fish-lipped frown. Below it, scribbled in rough letters, "The greatest warrior in camp." You couldn't help it. You laughed. Laughed. The kind of laugh that didn't carry tension or hide weariness. Just pure, simple laughter. The captain, whose shield had become a canvas, came out shortly after. He stared at the drawing, sighed, and muttered, "Whoever did this, clean it off. Though, decent work." Then he walked away. No one confessed, but everyone chuckled. After the plain breakfast, another prank surfaced. Someone had stuffed a handful of dry grass into a soldier's boot. He shoved his foot in, yelped, screamed, "Forest bug!" and jumped like he'd stepped on a wasp. The entire camp burst into laughter. Even he did. You thought laughter existed after the drums, swords, and fear. It didn't heal wounds, didn't chase away the cold, but it kept something human alive. Peter played his part too. He loosened a strap on your armor so that your shoulder guard slipped after 2 steps. You turned to glare, but he just whistled innocently. Then, as you bent down to fix it, he dropped a small onion into your armor. "Forwarding off evil," he grinned. "And the smell." You rolled your eyes, but laughed anyway. That evening, around the fire, someone started telling jokes. Nothing crude, nothing loud. Just simple stories, like the blacksmith who married his own wife by mistake, or the village cow that could sing. Each tale rolled through the camp like a soft ripple, lifting the weight from everyone's shoulders. One old soldier shared, "Early in the campaign, I mixed a bag of salt with the laxatives." The whole squad spent a day sprinting to the bushes. The camp howled. Peter leaned on your shoulder, wheezing. So did you. Not because it was the funniest thing ever, but because your facial muscles had forgotten how it felt to laugh freely. The final prank of the day was a classic. Someone dusted ash over a taut canvas sheet above a tent. The ash fell like snow over his head when the deputy yanked the line. He shrieked, then burst out laughing. No punishment followed. That day, everyone needed a laugh. You realized that laughing during the war wasn't disrespect. It was how you reminded each other that you were still human. Not machines, not walking corpses, but people, with sore muscles and hearts that still knew how to beat. Night fell. You lay beside Peter, arms around your old blanket. He was still giggling, remembering the grass-filled boot. "Tomorrow I'm stuffing a carrot into someone's shoe," he muttered. You smiled. "As long as it's not mine." He sat up. No promises. You pulled the blanket over your head. Sleep. That's enough laughing for one day. Not everyone stays until the final battle. Some are ordered to return due to injury. Some are chosen as messengers, and some simply have nothing left to fight for. That afternoon, after the usual dry bread and salted meat meal, you saw a small group preparing their packs. Just 3 of them. Each carried a cloth sack with a thin blanket, worn shoes, and an official letter bearing a red seal. They no longer wore armor, just thick coats and scarves around their necks. Their faces were dusty, but their eyes glimmered, not with joy but relief. Peter whispered, "They're going home." You watched them, not with envy, not with regret. Just a quiet ache inside, like someone had tapped gently on your chest. That night, by the fire, one of the three, an old soldier named Renaud, told stories of his village to those who remained. "In my village," he began, "every February the snow melts, and the smell of damp straw rises from the ox stalls. The children play hide and seek in haystacks taller than themselves. One time, a boy wandered all the way to old Madame Eloise's cabbage patch. She scolded him like the devil, and he just grinned the whole time." No one interrupted. No one drifted off. Everyone listened. "And my wife?" He paused, eyes distant. "She used to make honey cakes faster than anyone could eat them. The smell was so good even the cat would pass out from happiness." Someone chuckled. "At my place, the cakes burn if my mother even blinks. My father always snuck a corner before she turned around." The camp felt wrapped in a mist of memory. No one spoke of battle. No one spoke of death. Only the small, priceless things. You remembered your village, the apple tree behind the house where you and your sister used to climb for green fruit, the time you knocked over the honey jar, and your mother stayed mad the entire afternoon. Peter turned to you. "If you made it back, what's the first thing you'd do?" You thought for a moment. "I'd take off my boots, put my feet on the dirt floor, and just listen to the rain." He smiled. "Me? I'd hug my mother. Tight. No words." The moon that night shone brighter than it had in days. The camp was bathed in silver light, soft and kind. The wind brushed across the tents, carrying the scent of grass, horsehide, and the familiar touch of cold. Renaud turned in early. Tomorrow, he'd leave with the others, back to the village. He packed quietly, then placed a small stone at the corner of his tent, a quiet sign for the next soldier who would sleep there. You stared at that stone for a long time. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't smooth. Just a plain rock, palm-sized, unremarkable. But to you, it felt heavy with meaning. It's like a wish, like a promise. I was here, and I'll carry a piece of you all home with me. When the group departed, there were no drums or flags the next morning, just a few waves and nods, and a trail of eyes followed until their shapes disappeared behind the hill. Peter stood beside you. "I hope Renaud gets home safe." You nodded. "And there's honey cake waiting on the table." Both of you smiled. Not because of the cake, but because the thought of a dinner table still existing somewhere was warmth enough. You returned to the tent. The smell of dry grass, old cloth, and rusted iron lingered, but your heart felt a little calmer, a little lighter, as if someone had just told you a gentle story and placed a hand over your chest to say, "Hold on. There's still a way home." You used to think the enemy would be terrifying. Big, wearing an iron mask, eyes blazing with fire and constantly yelling, always striking, always cold as stone. That was the image passed down to you in stories told by firelight, tales meant to scare children into going to bed early. But today, sitting with Peter by the camp fence, you look across the distant field, where the enemy once stood, and realize they're not like the stories. 2 days ago, while sweeping a corner of the battlefield after the clash, your group found an abandoned backpack. Nothing special was in it. A worn handkerchief, a small spool of thread, and a water-stained letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, a little crooked, but someone had taken the time to translate it. It was a letter from a father to his son. "Your mother still bakes bread the same as ever. The hens have started laying again after the cold. When you come home, I'll fix the roof, and we'll eat outside like we used to. No battle cries, no oaths of honor. Just a letter about small things. The same kind of things the men on your side write too." You held that letter for a long time. You didn't know if the soldier who owned it was still alive. You didn't know if he'd ever read those words. But you did know. Beneath the armor, the flags, the names, they were people. Just like you. Just like Peter. Just like anyone in this camp. Peter told a story that day. Last campaign, I crossed swords with a guy, and we both slipped. We looked at each other. Didn't keep fighting. Just breathed. He nodded. I nodded back. Then we both retreated. You didn't keep fighting? You asked. No need. We were tired. Besides, I figured he probably had someone waiting for him too. You remembered the eyes of the soldier you once stabbed, not filled with hatred. Just surprise, then emptiness. It was a very brief moment, but one that stayed. Today the wind is still. While fetching water, you noticed a thin wisp of smoke rising from the forest's edge, where the enemy had camped. No gunshots, no alarms. It's just kitchen smoke. You paused. Then, I kept walking. Not in a rush. But I'm not hesitating either. That evening by the fire, someone brought out a small guitar. Someone from the supply tent had found it in an abandoned crate. One string was broken, but I could still play a few simple notes. The melody wasn't clear. Maybe a village tune. Maybe improvised. But it floated, through the wind, past the tents, over the fence, and perhaps someone on the other side heard it too. You don't know if you'd recognize today's enemy if you met them again. Maybe they shave. Perhaps they wear different clothes. Maybe they sigh at the end of a long day. But one thing you're certain of. The enemy isn't someone you hate. It's someone you're forced to face. Not out of vengeance. Not for glory. But because history has placed you on opposite ends of a blade. Peter said that night, "If this war ever ends, I want to buy a guy from the other side a beer." You nodded. "As long as he doesn't stab me first." Both of you laughed softly, then fell silent. But it was the kind of silence that no longer felt heavy. That afternoon, the camp was livelier than usual. Not because of any drum rolls, nor because the enemy was at the gates, but because of a rumor. Someone claimed to have overheard a high-ranking officer whispering to the quartermaster that a retreat order was coming. Someone else swore, "It's not a retreat, it's a relocation to a new land with less blood and more wheat." No one knew which story was true, but in camp, rumors were like cooking smoke. You didn't need a big fire for it to spread. It slipped into every corner, clung to every ear, every passing greeting. You were washing your hands at the well when you heard two young soldiers chatting. "I heard another army is coming over the mountain to support us. They're bringing fruit jam." You looked up and smirked. "Jam, huh?" "Yeah, real jam. With raisins too, from the south." You dried your hands and said nothing. Why ruin someone's hope? Sometimes even the silliest rumor gets people through a freezing afternoon. Peter said, "I heard the general's planning to marry the daughter of the tavern keeper in the next village." "Which tavern?" you asked. He winked. "Haven't checked, but romantic, right?" You laughed. Not because of the story, but because of how Peter said it, like a cool breeze brushing your face. As night fell, the cooking tent buzzed louder than usual. Someone swore they saw a strange flag raised to the north. Another claimed to have heard hooves at noon, unlike the usual ones. Could be reinforcements. Or the enemy changing tactics. Or villagers out hunting. Every guess made sense, but no one was certain. And because no one was certain, the guessing never stopped. A game that never ended. You sat by the fire, warming your shoes, while someone told a childhood tale. "I used to think dragons were real. My mom said if I didn't sleep, a dragon would come get me. I believed her till I was 10. Another chimed in. "I was told if I swore, the village priest would come shave my head." The group chuckled. Not loud, not wild, but just enough to shake the chill from your collar. There was a strange rhythm among those tales. worry and humor woven together like the two sides of an old coin. Everyone was afraid of something, but fear only grows dangerous when no one dares to name it. And thanks to hallway rumors, unexpected jokes, and definitely true reports, the campers kept hold of a fragile rhythm of life. Not joy exactly, but warmth. Just enough to keep from being swept away by the cold. You lay next to Peter that night, still talking about the mythical jam. "If someone really brings jam," Peter said, "I'll give them my right boot. Still in good shape. And the left one? I'm keeping it, in case I need to run off sweet-footed." You chuckled and shook your head. "What even goes on in your brain?" He answered without missing a beat. "Jam and hope." Then he closed his eyes. Fell asleep just like that. You stared at the tent ceiling, thinking about all the rumors that never came true, and realized they worked like lullabies. Maybe not real, but enough to make someone smile and fall asleep just a little easier. That night, the cold was harsher than usual. Not because the wind blew harder or the frost came thicker, but because the chill had seeped deep into every layer of fabric, every crease in your armor, every threadbare blanket. And as you curled up in the tent, arms hugging your stomach, you could only think of one thing. If only there were a bowl of something hot. The next morning, something strange happened. Just as you were splashing your face with icy water near the well, someone called out, not loudly, but loud enough to make heads turn. "Soup! There's soup this morning." You looked up. Peter was jogging toward you, holding a wooden bowl, thin wisps of steam curling from it. Something rich hung in the air, warm and savory. Hard to tell if it was meat or vegetables, but not plain water. "How?" you asked, eyes fixed on the rising steam. "They got a supply crate late last night," Peter said, catching his breath. "Bones, onions, some beans. They made soup. 1 bowl per person." You had never walked so fast to the cook's tent. A neat line had already formed. No shoving, no complaints. Everyone stood with eyes just a little brighter than usual. The cook, a broad man with a sweaty brow, ladled each portion with the care of a ritual. When it was your turn, he looked at you and said, "It's cold this morning. This soup is to remind you that you're still warm." You nodded, unsure how to respond. The soup wasn't thick, but inside were soft beans, shreds of tender meat, thin slices of onion, and a hint of some leafy herb. No need for salt, no need for bread. Just 1 spoonful of hot soup made your heart warm again. Peter sat beside you, took a sip, then let out a long hiss through his teeth. "Best thing I've eaten since we marched out." You nodded. "Still hot. Hope heats up with it." That was the moment you paused, because you realized the soup was good not just for its taste, but for what it meant. You hadn't been forgotten. In war, no one dares to expect a full meal. But if something has flavor, warmth, and care, even just a little, it's enough to believe that someone, somewhere, is trying to keep you alive with the smallest of efforts. The soldier to your left, Hugo, ate slowly, blowing gently on each spoonful. "My mother used to make soup like this every winter night," he said. "She'd say soup can't save a life, but it keeps people warm enough to sleep and awake enough not to give up." Someone else added, "In my village, when someone has their first child, they get ginger soup. Helps the body, reminds you that you've done something that matters." You thought to yourself, a humble bowl of soup might be the closest thing to a blessing in war. That morning, the camp was quieter than usual, but not somber. The clinking of spoons, the sighs after eating, and the crackle of the kitchen fire became a kind of music like mornings in a faraway village. After serving the last bowl, the cook sat down in a corner of the tent. He poured himself the final bit from the pot. He didn't drink right away. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and then took slow sips. He looked like a wizard who had just finished his morning spell. After washing your bowl, you walked back toward your tent. Peter walked beside you, hands in his coat pockets. He looked up at the sky, where the sun was still hidden behind clouds. "I think today might be okay," he said. "Because of soup?" "Yeah, not because it fills you up, but because it's warm. And it's real." You didn't answer, but something lit up inside. A small, soft light. Not blazing, not blinding, but enough to soften some quiet, unspoken corner in your chest. That night, Peter said, "If there's soup tomorrow, I'll save a bowl, reheat it at night, and drink it before bed." You laughed. "Don't let it turn to jelly. Doesn't matter, as long as it still warms the heart." You both fell quiet, lost in separate thoughts, but sharing one truth. Hope doesn't need to be grand. Sometimes it just needs to be the size of a spoonful of hot soup. Duoi jai laban dich tieng an trao chuot. Gyun guyen gyonkin hen hangva tinte. Fuhop voi fong kach kichuyen lich su. Voi kau truk maklak vajung chuan gufap. That morning, dawn rose earlier than usual. Not because the sky was clearer, but because campers were already awake. No one shouted, no one rushed, but you could feel it in every motion. The way hands tied shoelaces more firmly, footsteps grew quieter, and eyes scanned the distance more carefully. Peter sat beside you, tightening the straps of his armor. "Something's different today." You nodded. There was no signal, no trumpet call. Just the air itself, heavy and certain, telling everyone, the battle is returning. That morning, a scout returned from the forward post, his face streaked with mud, sweat, and faint ashes. He spoke only a few words. "They're moving. Fast. They could attack within 2 days. Maybe sooner." No one panicked. No one shouted. A long, quiet sigh spread from man to man like a ripple across still water. An older soldier stood up and silently tightened the strap across his chest. Another checked the arrows in his quiver. Everyone knew what to do, as if they'd been waiting for this moment all along. Peter took out a small cloth from his pocket and wiped his sword. "I'm not ready to fight again," he said. "No one is." "Yeah, but we will." You said nothing. You began cleaning your shield. Among the preparations, you noticed small, quiet rituals. Someone tied a red string around the shaft of their spear, perhaps a private symbol. Another tucked a coin into his shirt, not for spending, but for luck. Someone else carved a lover's name into the hilt of their sword with a dull blade. What did you do? You took the thin scarf your mother gave you before the farewell and tied it around your wrist, hidden beneath your sleeve. Not for anyone else to see, but to remind yourself, you are someone's child. At noon, the cook still made soup, but no one lingered. Each man held his bowl close, sat shoulder to shoulder, and ate quickly, not hurriedly, but because each bite tasted better when calm. Someone brought out a bamboo flute and played a few simple notes. Another tapped a rhythm on a tin pot. It wasn't quite a song, but it was something close. And music is the nearest thing to a blessing on a day before blood. You sat beside Peter. Neither of you said much. You just leaned against a tent post, eyes on the grassy hill. The wind blew, rustling dry leaves. A lone crow landed, pecked at fallen grain, and flew off. For a brief moment, everything seemed to forget that a clash was coming. By sunset, the orders came. Rest early tonight. We move at dawn. Peter lay beside you. I think we'll be okay. And if we're not, you said, at least we'll face it with our heads up. He chuckled softly, and hope the wind is on our side. That night, everyone lay down early. No songs, no jokes. But each person murmured something small, just enough to remind themselves, we are still here. We still have each other. You pulled your blanket up to your chin, eyes on the tent roof. Beside you, Peter's breathing slowed. Far off, the steady steps of a guard circled the camp, calm and patient. The moon rose late, casting pale silver light through the seams of the canvas. You closed your eyes, not hoping for a long sleep, just a few quiet minutes. Enough to steady the heart. Because tomorrow, the battle will return, and you will rise again alongside those you've come to know in the dark and by the fire. Not out of hatred, but because you've learned how to endure together in the most fragile moments. That morning, dawn arrived in a shade of gray. Not the gray of a coming storm, but the pale, cold gray of lingering mist, damp soil still clinging to the ground, wild grasses standing still as if holding their breath. Everything was so quiet that even breathing seemed loud among the crowded tents. You woke up before the sky turned. Peter was still asleep, clutching his armor like a strange makeshift pillow. You didn't wake him. You just sat up, laced your boots, and stepped outside. There were no drums, no fiery speeches. Only a column of people quietly preparing to move out. Lines of footsteps stretched ahead, silent and steady. Those in front stared straight ahead. Those in the back looked down. No one spoke loudly. No one asked where they were going. Everyone carried a private question, but no one dared break the silence that hung like a blanket of fog. You joined the line. Your shoulder brushed Peter's. Your hand gripped your shield. Your steps pressed gently into the damp earth. It felt like you were walking onto a stage, but there were no spotlights, no audience, only you and whatever was about to unfold. Past the grassy hill, the formation spread out. Before you lay a low field stretching to the edge of the forest. The grass reached your knees. The soil was soft and slightly slick. The sun was still hiding behind a long band of clouds. No bird song, only wind, cold wind, whipping gently across your spine. "Is it here?" Peter whispered. You nodded. "Looks like it." Both of you stood in formation, hands resting firmly on your weapons. No one had drawn a sword yet. There was no need. But the cold bite of the hilt was enough to jolt you fully awake. Then, sounds in the distance. Rustling. Hooves. Not fast. Not frantic. It was just a quiet sign that the other side was ready too. The captain gave a signal with his hand. No one moved. You crouched slightly, scanning the tall grass ahead. You saw no one, but you knew. Someone out there was watching you back, just as tense, as breathless, and as tightly gripping their sword. A low horn sounded, soft, not sharp. It was not a call to charge, just a reminder. It was time. You drew a long breath. Your chest rose, then tightened. Cold air filled your lungs, sharpening every nerve in your fingers. Peter whispered, "No matter what happens, I'm glad I met you here." You looked at him. Me too. Then, both of you turned to face the field. And just like that, dawn truly began. Not with light, but with footsteps, boots pressing into the wet grass, armor clinked softly, shields lifting from the ground, and the deep breath of a line of people who knew there was no turning back. You stepped forward, one step, then another, like a slow wave rising from the riverbank. No rush, but steady. Figures began to appear through the grass. The enemy. They didn't look so different. It's the same dull armor. They have the same rounded helmets. They have the same wide eyes behind the metal. No one shouted. No one broke rank with a wild charge. Just two walls of breath and steel moving toward one another. And in that moment, before the clash, the first scream and the swords sang, you realized something. You were alive, truly alive, in fear, in clarity, in the shared rhythm of those beside you. Peter gripped his shield tighter. You wiped your brow. Dew still clung to the grass. Your hands still trembled. But your eyes were steady now, no longer looking away. A battlefield at dawn isn't a place for heroes. It's a place for those who have no other choice, but still choose to stand. And in that moment, you understood. Whatever happens next, You were here. At the right time. In the right place. With every ounce of courage, a person can gather. The first sound of battle wasn't a scream. It was the sound of boots pounding into the wet earth, step after step, like drums rising from the ground. Then came the clinking of armor, the taut snap of bowstrings, the faint hiss of spears slicing through the air. All of it, like a strange orchestra playing a symphony of chaos. Time stopped making sense. All that remained were fleeting fragments. Your breath, the thudding of your heart, and the cold crawling up the back of your neck, as if the wind was no longer blowing from the sky, but from somewhere deep inside you. When the formations collided, sound erupted thick and heavy, like sledgehammers on a war drum. The crashing of shields, the snap of broken blades, the thud of bodies falling, someone yelling, unclear whether it was rage, pain, or just the raw reflex of survival. You didn't scream. Peter didn't scream. You both just breathed, deep, fast breaths, then raised your shields, stepped back, stepped forward. The world was reduced to movement, to the feel of a strike landing or a block slipping. You remember the sound of a sword striking armor, a ringing clang, sharp as a bell. Then there was the softer sound, almost a whisper when a blade didn't meet metal but slid through the fabric. That sound was slight, but at close range, it rang in your ears like a finger snapping next to your skull. You didn't see faces, but you saw eyes, those on the other side. They were afraid too. Their shields trembled slightly. Their breathing came in gasps, just like yours. One man charged you, sword raised. You brought up your shield. The impact numbed your arm. You stepped back, turned your body, and used the flat of your blade to shove him aside. It's not a killing blow, but enough to keep you standing. Peter took a hit from the left. He staggered and nearly fell. You grabbed his arm just as another enemy lunged. Peter spun, thrust back, missed, but caught his balance. You both retreated a row. No words were exchanged, but that quick grip between you and Peter was the language of survival. You heard the sound of horses in the distance. Someone had sent in the cavalry. The ground began to tremble. Not an earthquake, but the steady rhythm of hooves striking the earth. You ducked under a low swing and rose again, catching the muffled shout of an officer, half lost in the wind, but enough to understand. Hold the line, don't scatter. You saw a young soldier fall face first into the grass, helmet rolling several feet away. No one stopped to help. Not because they didn't care, but because everyone was trying not to fall themselves. Amid all the chaos, there was a strange moment. You heard birdsong. Not nearby. Somewhere far, maybe above the treetops, a bird or two soaring across the sky. They didn't know a battle raged below. They chirped. They flapped. They followed the wind. That sound was so faint it was nearly drowned. But you heard it. And you remembered it, because it was the only sound that day that had nothing to do with war. You struck a few more times, growing tired. Your shoulder ached. Your arms buzzed. Breaths came shorter. Peter slipped back beside you, and you leaned against each other momentarily, like two trees sharing the same wind. "You all right?" you asked. "Still standing," he said between breaths. Then, you both moved forward again. You don't know how long the battle lasted. An hour? 3? But when the call to retreat rang out, everything seemed to dissolve. No one cheered. No fists were raised in triumph. Everyone stepped back, 1 foot at a time, carrying with them the sound of steel, breath, and survival. You turned and saw a field scarred with footprints, slashes, and crushed grass behind you. The sounds were smaller now, just the clinking of loose straps, the creak of broken wood, and an occasional soft groan. Peter leaned into you. "Are we heading home yet?" "Not yet, but we're walking." You both smiled, not wide, but enough to take another step toward camp. And in your mind, still echoing through all the clangs of war, was the sound of birds flying across the battlefield. When the battle quieted, the first thing to return wasn't the sound of voices. Silence. The silence was like a thick fog draped over the entire camp. No one dared break it. No one rushed to speak, and no one dared to count. Because everyone knew, not all of them had made it back. You strolled across the field, damp with turned earth, your boots still caked with mud and crushed grass. With every step, there was something to avoid. A discarded helmet, a snapped spear, a torn fabric bag lying open like a mouth. Peter walked beside you. He said nothing. His shoulder slouched, a long gash down his arm, but he still gripped his shield strap as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. You saw Rolf for the last time that morning while tying your laces. He said, "If you see a little green wooden charm, pick it up for me." You smiled. "Just hold on to it." He smiled back, then marched off a few rows ahead. That afternoon, they found the charm, lying beside a body draped in a brown cloth. No one wailed, no one collapsed, but one by one, people walked over and laid a hand on the shoulder of the person next to them, a kind of comfort that didn't need words. There was a young recruit, only 10 days in, named Elias. He liked to talk about boiled eggs and fishing ponds. He didn't come back. They searched for his name on the list. It wasn't crossed out and just marked with a single gray dot. That gray dot was like an ink blot on an unfinished page. Small, but impossible to erase. That evening the camp lit more fires than usual. Not because it was colder, but because everyone needed light, to see each other clearly, to remind themselves who was still here. You sat near Peter. Neither of you ate much. The soup tasted the same, but somehow it felt duller. Maybe it was the smoke. Or maybe your heart had gone quiet. The commander walked through the camp, reading no names, calling no one. He simply placed small stones belonging to those who hadn't returned at the corners of the tents. Each stone is a symbol. No one asked. No one touched them. They remained in place. Silent nods to the past. Someone carefully laid a pair of boots beside a tree. They had no owner now, but they still looked like boots waiting for someone to step into them. Peter said, "If I don't wake up tomorrow, take the letter in my coat. Send it to my mother." You looked at him. "I don't want to do that." He nodded. "I don't want you to either, but I want to know someone will." You nodded back. No promises needed. He understood. The night wind slipped through the tents, rustling the flaps gently like the breath of those who sleep with uneasy hearts. Someone played the flute. It's not a song, just a few slow, quiet notes, falling one by one like dew. No one clapped. But everyone closed their eyes, letting the melody drift inward, to touch the place where memory sleeps. You didn't know who would still be here tomorrow, but you knew tonight that someone was still lying beside you. The fire still flickered. A warm bowl still rested by your hand. And you thought quietly, that was already enough to be grateful for. Those who didn't return weren't forgotten. They lingered, in the smoke, the scratches on your arm, the broken laughter of half-told stories, and the instructions they never got to finish. You lay down, pulling the straw blanket up to your chin. You closed your eyes, and in your heart, one thought rang out soft and distant, like a bell far away. "If I don't return tomorrow, please tell them. I tried." One autumn morning, many years later, you wake as the sun creeps just over the roof, slanting through the wooden shutters into the room where you've slept all night like someone who no longer wears armor. There are no more boots striking stone, no more horns or shouted names, no Peter lying on the bed beside you. Only the birds, the wind, and the sound of your hand brushing the edge of a worn blanket, thinned by time. The battle is extended behind you, not yesterday, not last month, but long enough ago for grass to grow over footprints, for rust to devour the edge of swords. for memory to dull. Not like a blade, but like a plume of steam fading in the air. You step out to the backyard, where the apple tree your mother once planted now stands old, its bark gnarled, its canopy no longer thick. Beneath it, there's a low wooden stool. You sit down, holding a bowl of hot water, eyes watching the steam rise and vanish into nothing. Some nights, you still dream of the sound of shields clashing, of trampled grass, of breath against your ear. But the dreams no longer scare you. They're simply memory speaking its name when the night is still enough. You came back. You rebuilt the fence. You planted a garden, repaired the roof. Some days, you sit and carefully stitch the seam of an old tunic Peter once tore. Some days, you write the names of those who didn't return into a notebook, though no one ever asked you to, not to glorify, but to be sure they existed. Each season, you make a small pot of soup. Not because you're hungry, but because it's the kind of meal that reminds you you're still here, on this land, in this house, with these hands. Sometimes you light a candle before bed, a soft, warm glow. Next to it, you place a small stone, like the ones the commander used to leave at the tents of those who never came back. A quiet way to remember. People in the village sometimes ask, "You really went to war?" You smile. "I once stood in the line." "And did you fight like in the stories?" You shake your head. "Number we breathed. We held our shields. We counted our heartbeats." They don't understand, and they don't need to. You don't tell them everything. You just keep the parts you can whisper to yourself, like an old song no one remembers the words to. But the tune still lives somewhere in your chest. One day, you receive a letter from Peter's son. Written in uncertain strokes, it asks, "Was my father brave?" You sit for a long while. Then you write back a simple line. Your father still smiled, even when no one else had the strength to. And that, my dear boy, is brave enough. You tuck the letter into a drawer beside the handkerchief your mother tied to your wrist before you left. Both still carry a faint scent of wind, smoke, and someone once held close. The days pass slowly, but you don't feel lonely. Every quiet moment now is a small victory, a survivor's prize from when breath was the most fragile thing. Evening falls. The sun stretches across the windowsill. You close your notebook, blow out the candle, pull the blanket up to your chest, close your eyes, and in that sleep, you dream. No more battles, no more blood, no more screams, just an open field, lush and green, and a slow-moving line of figures walking beneath gentle sunlight. Familiar faces, Peter, Rolf, Elias, walking just ahead. They turn and smile at you. No one speaks, but their eyes say enough. We made it home, and so the story ends, not with a drum roll, not with glory, but with the soft breath of evening, a deep sleep where you no longer wear armor, no longer carry a sword. Only this remains, a person who walked, endured, and returned. Sleep well, my friend. You did beautifully.